Blood pooled on obsidian floors like spilled ink, and the Empress's blade gleamed with fatal promise. 47 lives had been sacrificed in crimson devotion, until a lone human soldier walked unshackled into her ritual chamber. The vast palace of the Vrisari Empire rose like a living monument against the violet sky of Varenth Prime. For millennia, it had stood as the center of power for a species centuries ahead of most others in the galaxy. Its spires twisted upward in defiance of gravity, their surfaces embedded with bioluminescent veins that pulsed with the collective consciousness of the Empire's psychically gifted rulers. Deep within this architectural marvel lay the ritual chamber, a cavernous space where tradition met necessity with brutal efficiency. The chamber's obsidian stone floor had been carved with symbols that seemed to shift when viewed from different angles, as if the very language of the ancients refused to be pinned down by a single perspective. Bioluminescent veins glowed beneath the surface, casting an ethereal blue light that danced across the high ceilings. The walls themselves seemed to whisper, carrying echoes of the dead suitors who had entered this space with ambition and left it only in spirit. Empress Ferrara stood motionless at the chamber's center, her pale blue skin luminescent under the cold light. Platinum hair cascaded down her back like a frozen waterfall, framing crimson eyes that betrayed no emotion. Her ceremonial black metal armor both intimidated and enticed. Panels curved to accentuate her form, while sharp edges warned of the danger beneath beauty. She had worn this same armor for 47 ceremonies, and 47 times it had been splashed with the blood of noble houses, whose scions had failed to bond with her mind and body. "The 47th has joined his predecessors," she said, her voice carrying the weight of centuries. She did not bother to look at the still warm body being dragged from the obsidian altar. Vex, her chief advisor, bowed his scaled head in acknowledgement. His stoic demeanor betrayed none of the growing concern he harbored for the Empire's future. Each failed ritual not only meant another noble house in mourning, but also brought the Empire one step closer to losing its Empress. The hunger that gnawed at her psyche would eventually consume her, as it had every unbonded Vrisari ruler before her. "The House of Laurenti will be informed of their loss," Vex said, his clawed hand making a gesture of respectful closure. They were the last of the major houses with suitable candidates. Ferrara's fingers tightened almost imperceptibly around her ritual blade. "Then we must look beyond the major houses. The minor nobility must have someone—" "Your Majesty," Vex interrupted, a rare breach of protocol that signaled the gravity of the situation. "The minor houses have already withdrawn their candidates after the 40th ritual. They will not sacrifice more of their bloodlines." The Empress turned, her crimson eyes finally meeting her advisor's gaze. "Then what would you have me do? Vex, allow the hunger to take me? Let madness claim the throne?" Commander Rain, who had been standing silently at the chamber's entrance, stepped forward. His uniform bore the insignia of 1,000 battles, and the set of his shoulders spoke of a man accustomed to making difficult decisions. "Your Majesty," he said with a formal bow, "perhaps there is another option. Our forces captured a prisoner during the border skirmish with the human territories. He possesses unusual mental fortitude." Ferrara's eyebrow arched. "A human? You suggest I bond with a creature that has barely mastered interstellar travel?" "I suggest," Rain said carefully, "that you consider all possibilities before resigning yourself to the fate that claimed your predecessor." Silence fell over the chamber. Ferrara turned back to the obsidian altar, running her fingertips along its smooth surface. 47 failures. 47 noble lives extinguished because they could not withstand the full force of her telepathic presence. "Bring him," she finally said, not turning around. "Let us see if human resilience is more than just a battlefield myth." As Commander Rain departed to retrieve the prisoner, Vex moved closer to his Empress. "The court will not approve," he said quietly. "The court has provided 47 failures," Ferrara replied, her voice colder than the deepest reaches of space. They have forfeited their right to approval. Behind her mask of practiced indifference, Ferrara felt the familiar pull of the hunger, the psychic emptiness that demanded to be filled. The ritual bond was not merely tradition, it was biological necessity. Without a compatible mind to join with hers, the psychic powers that made the Vrisari supreme rulers of a dozen star systems would eventually consume her from within. Rumor had spread through the palace halls that she had perhaps one more cycle of her species-long life before madness would claim her. She had seen it happen to her mother, the slow deterioration, the fractured thoughts, the eventual dissolution of self, until only a shell remained, housing the ravenous power that had once been controlled by a brilliant mind. Ferrara closed her eyes briefly, allowing herself a moment of private exhaustion. Centuries of rule had taught her to hide vulnerability, but each failed ritual drained her life force a little more. She was not ready to join the whispers in the walls. The massive doors of the ritual chamber groaned open in the pre-dawn hours, pulling Ferrara from her meditation. Commander Rain entered first, followed by a figure that immediately sent a ripple of murmurs through the assembled court officials. The human walked with his hands unbound, though his wrists bore the marks of recent captivity. Dark hair fell across a face weathered by conflict, and his torn uniform suggested a soldier of some rank. What struck Ferrara most, however, was not his alien appearance but the way he carried himself. Shoulders squared, gaze direct and unflinching as it met her own crimson eyes. "Your Majesty," Commander Rain announced, "I present Lucas, Lieutenant Commander of the Human Alliance Border Fleet." The human gave no bow, made no gesture of deference. He simply stood, assessing the chamber and its occupants with the calculating gaze of a battlefield strategist. Ferrara circled the obsidian altar, noting the human's soldier's build and weathered hands. He was lean but clearly strong, with a stillness about him that spoke of disciplined training. "I'm here to become number 48, aren't I?" Lucas asked, his voice carrying easily across the hushed chamber. A murmur of shock rippled through the court at the prisoner's boldness. No one addressed the Empress without permission, particularly not with such directness. Ferrara's lips curved into the barest suggestion of a smile. "All previous suitors died," she replied. "You will, too, unless you can do what the others could not." "And what exactly is that?" Lucas asked, stepping closer to the altar despite the warning hisses from the guards. "Survive me," Ferrara said simply. The human's eyes narrowed slightly, his gaze moving from the Empress to the obsidian altar and back again. "Your people capture me at the border, drag me across half a galaxy, and now expect me to participate in some alien mating ritual? Fascinating diplomatic strategy." Several courtiers gasped at the human's insolence, but Ferrara found herself intrigued by his fearlessness. The noble suitors had approached her with reverence and ambition, each hoping to become the emperor consort. None had dared to question the ritual itself. "It is not diplomacy," she replied, "but necessity. My species requires a psychic bond to stabilize our abilities. Without it, the power consumes us." "And the 47 before me?" "Their minds fractured under the strain of my telepathic presence." Lucas tilted his head slightly. "So I either bond with you successfully or die in the attempt. Not much of a choice." "There is no choice," Ferrara said, her crimson eyes holding his gaze. "Only inevitability." For a moment, something flickered in the human's expression. Not fear, as she might have expected, but a spark of defiance. The first genuine emotion Ferrara had felt in decades stirred within her. Intrigue. Around them, the court officials exchanged uneasy glances. Some whispered behind their hands, questioning whether a human could possibly survive the telepathic onslaught that had shattered the minds of Vrisari nobility. Others speculated that if Ferrara failed again, the rival houses might finally see their opportunity to challenge her rule. As if sensing their thoughts, The obsidian altar's carvings shifted beneath the surface, ancient symbols rearranging themselves into new configurations. It was said that the altar itself was alive in some fundamental way, recording the history of every bonding ritual since the Empire's founding. Now, it seemed to watch this unprecedented event with the same curiosity that Ferrara herself felt. "When do we begin?" Lucas asked, his voice betraying no hesitation. Ferrara gestured toward a doorway at the far end of the chamber. "Now, we begin with the test of telepathic compatibility." The compatibility chamber was located in a secluded wing of the palace, far from the prying eyes of the court. Its walls were inscribed with ancient Vrisari glyphs, a language older than the Empire itself, designed specifically to channel and direct psychic energy. The floor contained embedded psychic conduits that hummed with latent power, ready to capture and measure the telepathic exchange. At the chamber's center stood the bonding matrix, a complex arrangement of bioelectric channels that would test the mental barriers of any potential consort. 47 nobles had entered this room with Ferrara. None had proceeded to the next chamber. Lucas surveyed the space with quiet attention, his soldier's instincts cataloging potential threats and exits. "Impressive technology for what amounts to a sophisticated compatibility test," he observed. "It is more than a test," Ferrara replied, removing the outer layer of her ceremonial armor to reveal a simpler garment beneath. "It is the first trial of 3. If your mind shatters here, it will be a cleaner death than failing in the later stages." She approached him slowly, her movements graceful and predatory. "I will touch your mind now. The matrix will amplify the connection. Most cannot withstand even this preliminary contact." Without waiting for his response, Ferrara placed her cool palm against Lucas's chest, directly over his heart. The psychic conduits in the floor flared to life, their soft glow intensifying the brilliant blue streaks that encircled the pair. Lucas's body went rigid as the first wave of telepathic energy surged through him. Foreign memories flooded his consciousness. Childhood hunts through violet forests, the weight of the imperial crown settling on platinum hair, the gnawing hunger that threatened Ferrara's sanity. Emotions, not his own, cascaded through his mind. Centuries of isolation, the burden of empire, the desperate hope that died with each failed ritual. Ferrara felt the human's terror as her consciousness invaded his. She had experienced this reaction 47 times before. The panic, the desperate attempt to shield the self, the inevitable fracturing as the foreign presence overwhelmed the host mind. She braced herself for the familiar psychic recoil of a breaking consciousness. It never came. Instead, she encountered resistance. Not the brittle shield of fear that the others had erected, but something more sophisticated. The human's mind seemed to be compartmentalizing, observing her emotions clinically instead of being consumed by them. Military training. Perhaps. The ability to function under extreme stress, to separate emotion from action. Ferrara pushed deeper, expecting to find the breaking point. Still, Lucas resisted. His breathing had become labored, sweat beading on his forehead, but his mind remained intact, absorbing and processing the telepathic invasion rather than shattering beneath it. With a gasp, Ferrara withdrew her hand and broke the connection. The conduits in the floor dimmed as the psychic pressure dissipated. Lucas drew a ragged breath. His hands braced against his knees as he fought to regain his equilibrium. "Impossible," Ferrara whispered, crimson eyes wide with shock. Beyond the chamber's threshold, Vex and Commander Rain exchanged astonished looks. No one had ever survived the preliminary trial without significant psychic training. Certainly no human. "What happens now?" Lucas asked, once he had recovered enough to stand straight again. Ferrara studied him with new interest. For the first time in centuries, she felt something dangerously close to hope. "Now," she said, "we proceed to the second trial." The preparation chamber for the second trial presented a stark contrast to the austere functionality of the compatibility room. Private and lush. The suite was draped in midnight blue silks that shifted in the gentle air currents. Pedestals of varying heights displayed strange implements of both sensation and pain, tools of the Vrisari bonding ritual that tested the physical and emotional synchronization of potential mates. Bioluminescent orbs floated near the ceiling, casting a warm glow that pulsed subtly, almost like a heartbeat. The air was perfumed with a sweetness that seemed to heighten nerve endings, making skin more sensitive to touch. Ferrara entered wearing flowing robes that both concealed and revealed, the fabric clinging to her form before billowing into ethereal trails behind her. Lucas had been given time to clean himself, though he still wore the remains of his military uniform. "The second trial tests our physical and emotional compatibility," Ferrara explained, her voice softer in this intimate setting. "The telepathic bond must be matched by a bodily resonance. Among my people, pleasure and pain are not opposites but complementary experiences that form the foundation of our bonding." She gestured to Lucas's uniform. "You will need to remove that." Lucas considered her for a moment, then complied without comment or posturing. He stripped methodically, revealing a body marked by the scars of warfare, a jagged line across his ribs, a starburst pattern on his shoulder, smaller marks scattered across his torso and limbs. Ferrara circled him slowly, her crimson eyes taking in each mark. "Your species wears its history on its skin," she observed. "Fascinating." "Each scar tells a story," Lucas replied, remaining still under her scrutiny. "Some better than others." The Empress reached out, her fingertips hovering just above a particularly vicious scar that ran across his collarbone. "May I?" Lucas nodded once, and Ferrara's cool fingers made contact with his skin. A subtle current of psychic energy passed between them, and she felt an echo of the pain that had created the mark, a blade wielded by an enemy he had nonetheless managed to defeat. "You've survived much," she murmured. "So have you," Lucas replied, surprising her. "Just not in ways that leave visible marks." Ferrara's hand stilled against his skin. "What do you know of my survival?" "I felt it," he said simply. "During the first trial, centuries of isolation, the weight of watching everyone you know age and die while you continue, the fear of ending like your predecessor." A flicker of vulnerability crossed Ferrara's face before she could mask it. No one spoke so directly to her, certainly not about the private burdens of her reign. She withdrew her hand and moved to one of the pedestals, selecting a slender instrument that resembled a feather, but glowed with its own inner light. "The second trial requires both physical and emotional attunement," she said, regaining her composure. "I will touch you with various instruments of sensation. Your body's response will be measured against mine. Synchronization indicates compatibility." She approached Lucas again, the glowing feather-like object in her hand. With delicate precision, she traced it along his shoulder, down his arm, across his chest. Each touch left a faint trail of luminescence on his skin that faded slowly. Lucas remained still, but Ferrara could see the quickening of his pulse at his throat, feel the slight elevation in his body temperature. More importantly, through the nascent bond formed in the first trial, she could sense the echo of his sensations resonating in her own nervous system. She continued the ritual, alternating between instruments that produced pleasure and those that caused controlled discomfort. Throughout, Lucas maintained his composure, neither flinching from pain nor becoming lost in pleasure. Instead, he observed Ferrara with the same intensity she directed at him, noting the subtle changes in her breathing, the dilation of her pupils, the almost imperceptible tremor in her fingertips when certain sensations particularly resonated between them. "You're learning me," Ferrara realized aloud. "As you're learning me," Lucas confirmed. "Isn't that the purpose of this trial?" Ferrara set aside the current instrument, a small crystal that produced a sensation like ice wherever it touched. The purpose is to determine compatibility, not to give you insight into my responses. Isn't insight precisely what compatibility requires? Lucas countered. Understanding what affects the other, how they respond, what they need? The question hung in the air between them, challenging centuries of Risari ritual with simple human logic. Ferrara found herself without an immediate answer, another unprecedented experience in her long life. After a moment, Lucas broke the silence with a question of his own. What are your scars, Empress? Ferrara stiffened. I have none. Everyone has scars, Lucas said quietly. Not all are visible on the skin. The Empress turned away, moving to the window that overlooked the palace gardens far below. My scars are the 47 lives ended by this ritual, the isolation of centuries, the knowledge that my mind is beginning to fracture under the weight of unbonded power. I carry scars from decisions that cost lives, Lucas responded. Both of us know what it's like to survive when others do not. Ferrara turned back to him, truly seeing him for perhaps the first time. Not as a prisoner, not as a potential consort, but as a being who understood the burden of command and its consequences. In that moment, she realized he was the first person in centuries who had spoken to her as Ferrara, not merely as the Empress. You see me, she whispered, the admission feeling both dangerous and liberating. I do, Lucas confirmed, taking a step toward her. And I think you see me too. The bioluminescent orbs pulsed more intensely overhead, their rhythm synchronizing with the heartbeats of both participants. The second trial was reaching its conclusion, and for the first time in 47 attempts, Ferrara found herself hoping for success rather than preparing for failure. Their bodies stood close, but not yet fully joined, both acutely aware of the other's presence. The faint glow of the chamber's orbs pulsed in tune with their synchronized heartbeats, a visual confirmation of what the Empress already knew. They had passed the second trial. Meanwhile, rumors spread through the palace that, if Lucas failed the final trial, both he and Ferrara would die. And if both died, the power vacuum would shatter the empire. The stakes had never been higher, not just for Ferrara and her human captive, but for the entire Vrisari civilization. The secret ritual chamber for the final bonding trial was located deep beneath the palace, away from the prying eyes of the court. Unlike the opulence of the previous chambers, this space was sparse and sacred, a testament to the ancient origins of the Vrisari bonding tradition. At its center stood a living stone platform carved from a single gargantuan crystal, its surface etched with channels for the glowing bonding fluid that would facilitate the complete merger of minds and bodies. The platform was encircled by privacy screens, made of a material that blocked psychic energy, ensuring that the intense intimacy of the final bonding would remain contained. The only witnesses permitted for this most sacred of rituals were Vex, who had overseen every bonding attempt of Ferrara's reign, and Medicane, the palace's chief medical specialist, who stood ready to intervene if something went catastrophically wrong. Ferrara and Lucas entered the chamber barefoot, dressed in simple robes that would be discarded as the ritual progressed. The Empress's customary mask of authority had fallen away, replaced by an expression of solemn intensity. Too many had died in this chamber for her to approach the final trial with anything less than complete focus. If complete synchronization fails, she explained, her voice soft yet impossibly strong, your life and mine will both end. The psychic backlash from a failed final bonding is fatal to both participants. Lucas nodded, fully aware that no court intrigue or rebellion could save him now, only their shared union. I understand the risk, he said, and I accept it. They stepped onto the platform together, and the living stone seemed to warm beneath their feet. The channels carved into its surface began to fill with a luminescent fluid that pulsed with bioenergetic potential. Kneel! Ferrara instructed, lowering herself to the center of the platform. Lucas followed suit, facing her, their knees almost touching. The ancient Vrisari psychic technology, the bonding matrix embedded within the living stone, hummed to life. The channels glowed more intensely as the bioelectric fields of both participants began to intertwine, creating a visible web of energy that surrounded them. "Open your mind to me," Ferrara whispered, placing her palms upward on her knees. "As I open mine to you." Lucas placed his hands atop hers, completing the physical circuit. The effect was immediate and overwhelming, far more intense than their previous connections. Ferrara's consciousness surged into his mind, no longer testing or probing, but seeking complete integration. In previous attempts, this was the moment when the suitor's mind would be overwhelmed, crushed beneath the weight of centuries of memories and the raw power of Vrisari telepathy. The Empress's mind would instinctively dominate, seeking to absorb rather than merge, resulting in the destruction of both participants. But Lucas did something no previous suitor had attempted. Rather than trying to resist or shield himself, he willingly offered his own memories, his fears, his experiences of camaraderie, his human values and perspectives. His mind met Ferrara's not in battle, but in collaboration, creating a third space where their consciousnesses could coexist. Both participants gasped as their mindscapes fractured and reformed. Ferrara saw Lucas's childhood on a distant human colony, felt the camaraderie of his military unit, experienced the gut-wrenching loss of comrades in battle. Lucas witnessed Ferrara's birth under alien stars, her first kill during the hunting ritual that marked her passage to adulthood, her coronation as the weight of empire settled on shoulders too young to bear it. Both felt the crushing responsibility of ruling billions and making impossible choices that cost lives. Both understood the isolation of command, the necessity of maintaining distance from those who served them. Ferrara's mind shuddered as Lucas's resilience flooded into her consciousness, his human ability to endure suffering and continue functioning providing a counterbalance to her fractured psyche. She gasped, clinging to his hands as the full force of his mind merged with hers. Never before had any potential consort matched her so completely. With a psychic snap that reverberated through the chamber, a new hybrid bond formed, two separate identities merging into a shared synergy while maintaining their individual essences. Their hearts literally synchronized, beating in perfect rhythm. The bioluminescent fluid in the platform's channels blazed with intense light before settling into a warm, emerald glow that had never been seen in previous rituals. Their bodies moved together instinctively now, the physical union, a natural extension of their mental merger. Every sensation was shared through the bond, pain doubled, pleasure transcendent. They moved as one being with two bodies. The distinction between self and other temporarily dissolved in the ecstasy of complete connection. "I can feel your soul," Ferrara whispered against Lucas's lips. "And I feel you, at last," he responded, his voice rough with emotion. Around the base of the platform lay inert shards of obsidian from previous failures, now powerless in the face of successful bonding. The living stone platform's channels pulsed like veins of life itself, a symbol that true unity could transcend species and tradition. As the ritual reached its culmination, both Ferrara and Lucas cried out in unison, their separate identities reasserting themselves while maintaining the newly forged connection between them. They remained a we, even as they returned to being individuals, forever changed by the experience of complete union. The bonding matrix powered down gradually, the glow in the channels dimming to a steady pulse that matched their synchronized heartbeats. Vex's curtains parted, revealing the advisor's shocked expression. Beside him, Medicane stared at data readings that confirmed what seemed impossible. Both participants were not only alive, but physiologically enhanced by their successful bond. "It is done," Ferrara said, her voice stronger than it had been in centuries. The hunger that had gnawed at her mind for so long had been satisfied, replaced by a steady warmth that flowed through the bond she now shared with Lucas. "What happens now?" Lucas asked, still holding her hands in his. Ferrara smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her face. "Now," she said, "we rule together." The political fallout from the unprecedented bonding was swift and volatile. General Kestre, commander of the Imperial Fleet and representative of the most conservative faction of Risari society, stormed the throne room before dawn the following day. Her lupine ears were flattened against her skull, in barely contained fury, as she approached the dais where Ferrara sat with Lucas beside her. "This is an abomination," Kestra hissed, her clawed hand slashing through the air in a gesture of negation. "You have bonded with a wretched human, compromising the imperial lineage that has ruled for 10,000 years." The assembled council members murmured uneasily, many sharing Kestra's sentiment, but few willing to voice it so boldly to the Empress's face. Lucas, now bearing the title of consort, stepped forward calmly. His military uniform had been replaced with garments befitting his new station, though he wore them with the same disciplined bearing as his battlefield attire. "I saved your Empress's life," he said, his voice carrying easily across the throne room. "That alone guarantees my place." Kestra bared her teeth in a snarl. "A human has no place in our sacred traditions." "Traditions," Ferrara interjected coldly. "That cost 47 noble lives without producing a viable bond. Would you prefer I had become like my predecessor, General, a hollow shell consumed by madness, leaving the Empire vulnerable to its enemies?" The General's ears twitched, her anger temporarily checked by the practical truth of the Empress's words. The memory of the previous ruler's descent into madness was still fresh in the minds of many council members, a cautionary tale of what happened when the bonding ritual failed. "The bond is unprecedented," Ferrara continued, "but it is real and complete. Medican's readings confirm it." As if on cue, the chief medical specialist stepped forward from his position at the edge of the council chamber. His scaled hands held a data tablet displaying complex biometric readings. "The bond is not only successful but exceptional," Medicaine reported, his scientific detachment cutting through the emotional tension. "Initial readings show synchronized heart rates, accelerated cellular regeneration, and unprecedented neural patterns in both subjects." He turned the tablet to display a three-dimensional model of intertwined neural networks. "The human's neural architecture has adapted to support Versari telepathic functions, while Her Majesty's psychic abilities have stabilized completely. The hunger that plagued her has been neutralized." Several council members leaned forward, scientific curiosity temporarily overriding their cultural objections. One elder, with silver-streaked fur, raised a clawed hand. "Could this have implications beyond the imperial bond? Potential applications for interspecies communication or medical treatments?" "Potentially," Medicaine replied, his professional excitement breaking through his formal demeanor. "This hybrid consciousness could revolutionize our understanding of interspecies neural compatibility. However," he added more cautiously, "we must also consider unknown side effects. This is entirely uncharted territory." General Kestre slammed her fist against her chest in the traditional Vrisari gesture of protest. "The purity of our species is not a laboratory experiment. This abomination threatens thousands of years of carefully maintained bloodlines." "The purity of our species," Ferrara said icily, "was leading us toward extinction. 47 failed bonds in a single reign is unprecedented. The bloodlines you so revere were failing. General, adaptation is not contamination, it is survival." The debate raged through the palace corridors, long after the council session ended. Whisper networks formed among conservative factions, spreading rumors that the Empress has been contaminated and that the human influence would weaken the empire from within. These whispers eventually manifested in more dangerous forms. 3 days after the bonding announcement, as Ferrara and Lucas walked through the royal gardens in the late evening hours, shadows detached themselves from the ornamental hedges, masked assassins moving with lethal purpose. The first attacker lunged toward Lucas with a blade designed to sever the bond by killing the human consort. Before the weapon could find its mark, Ferrara had already sensed the assassin's intent through her enhanced telepathic abilities. Through their bond, Lucas received this warning instantly, reacting with the practiced precision of a combat veteran. As Ferrara telepathically tracked the positions and intentions of all attackers, Lucas countered with tactical efficiency. They moved in perfect synchronization, she deflecting a blow meant for him, he neutralizing a threat approaching her blind spot. Their shared consciousness eliminated the need for verbal communication, making them devastating opponents, even when outnumbered. Within moments, the assassination attempt had been thwarted, the would-be killers subdued and detained for questioning. Commander Rain arrived with palace security, his expression grim as he surveyed the scene. "Conservative faction?" Lucas asked, though he already suspected the answer. Rain nodded. "Likely backed by houses who lost sons to the ritual. They believe killing you will free the Empress to try again with a proper Versari noble." "A fatal miscalculation," Ferrara said coldly. "My life is now bound to his. Any harm to my consort would destroy me as well." Later that night, in the privacy of their chambers, the adrenaline of combat gave way to a more vulnerable moment between the newly bonded pair. Ferrara stood at the window overlooking the capital city, its bioluminescent architecture glowing softly against the night sky. "They will try again," she said quietly. "The old guard fears change more than death." Lucas approached, standing beside her at the window. Through their bond, he could feel her concern, not for herself, but for him, and for the stability of the empire she had sworn to protect. "Fear of change is universal," he replied. "Humans are no different in that regard." Ferrara turned to him, her crimson eyes searching his face. "Without you, I would have died alone," she admitted, tears threatening for perhaps the first time in centuries. 47 deaths on my conscience, and then my own madness to end it all. Lucas reached out, his fingers gently brushing a platinum strand of hair from her face. "I understand guilt," he said softly. "I've led soldiers into battles where not everyone returned. Each death feels like a personal failure, even when the mission succeeds." The parallel struck Ferrara deeply, her ritual deaths mirroring his battlefield losses. Both rulers in their own way, both bearing the burden of decisions that cost lives. Through their bond, she felt his genuine understanding, the shared weight of command that no one else in her life had ever truly comprehended. "How do you bear it?" she asked. "The weight of those losses?" "By honoring their sacrifice through my actions," Lucas replied. "By ensuring their deaths serve some greater purpose, even if only to remind me of the value of life." Ferrara leaned into his touch, allowing herself a vulnerability she had never shown to anyone else. "Perhaps that is what we can build together, something worthy of 47 sacrifices, a better empire, a new way forward." The news of their successful bond eventually leaked beyond the capital world, spreading to allied systems and even rival territories. The unprecedented nature of a human Versari bonding captured the imagination of billions, inspiring both hope and concern throughout the galaxy. An Andorian delegation arrived within weeks, requesting an audience with the Empress and her consort. The Andorians, a crystalline species with complex hive-like social structures, had suffered 3 generations of failed bonds within their royal lineage, leading to genetic instability and political fragmentation. Their queen, a being of translucent beauty, whose faceted body reflected the light in hypnotic patterns, approached Ferrara and Lucas with formal deference tinged with desperate hope. "Our records show 17 failed bondings in our current generation," she explained. her voice creating harmonic resonances in the throne room. Our genetic diversity diminishes with each failure. If a solution is not found, our species faces eventual collapse. Ferrara exchanged a glance with Lucas, their bond allowing them to communicate silently before she responded. "We can offer guidance," she said carefully, "but must warn you that each species' compatibility differs. What worked for us may not translate directly to Andorian physiology." "Any hope is better than certainty of extinction," the Andorian queen replied. Thus began a new chapter in interstellar relations, with the Vrisari Palace becoming a center for research into interspecies bonding. Under Medicane's supervision, detailed studies of Ferrara and Lucas's unique neural patterns led to breakthroughs in understanding how different species might achieve compatible psychic connections. Some attempts ended in tragedy, genetic incompatibilities proving too great to overcome. Others succeeded beyond expectation, creating new hybrid lineages that combined the strengths of multiple species. News of these successes and failures spread throughout the galaxy, creating both inspiration and caution. The old ritual chamber, once drenched in the blood of failed suitors, underwent a transformation. At Lucas's suggestion, and with Ferrara's approval, the obsidian altar was cleansed and repurposed. The chamber became a meditation hall where students from dozens of species studied the fundamentals of psychic communication and cross-species empathy. The obsidian floor, once stained with sacrifice, was polished to a mirror shine, no longer a site of death, but of learning and growth. Where noble suitors had once died in agony, young telepaths now trained to understand and connect with minds fundamentally different from their own. As decades passed, Ferrara and Lucas's joint reign transformed the Vrisari Empire in ways that extended far beyond the initial shock of their bonding. Their hybrid consciousness accelerated technological breakthroughs in biointegration, expanded the frontiers of psychic research, and fostered unprecedented alliances between species that had previously viewed each other with suspicion or outright hostility. Children throughout the Empire learned about the bonded Empress and her human consort in school, their unprecedented union becoming a foundation myth for a new era of interspecies cooperation. Prejudice against mixed species, families waned as hybrid communities flourished on multiple planets, each combining unique biological and cultural traits in novel ways. Ferrara herself underwent a profound transformation. The isolated, ritually driven ruler, who had executed 47 failed consorts, evolved into an empathetic sovereign who valued vulnerability as a strength rather than a weakness. She ruled with greater openness, delegating authority to partners rather than commanding alone, creating a more distributed and resilient power structure throughout the Empire. Lucas, once a captured enemy soldier, found purpose and meaning beyond any battlefield he had known. His human pragmatism complemented Ferrara's telepathic intuition, allowing them to approach challenges from multiple perspectives simultaneously. His military experience proved invaluable in reorganizing the Imperial Defense Forces, transforming them from conquest-oriented legions to peacekeeping units that protected established territories while respecting the sovereignty of neighboring systems. Their personal relationship deepened as well, moving beyond the initial shock of successful bonding into a partnership built on genuine understanding and respect. Through their shared consciousness, each gained perspective impossible to achieve alone, Ferrara experiencing human adaptability and emotional resilience, Lucas understanding the vast temporal perspective of a near-immortal being. But the passage of time eventually brought a challenge that even their extraordinary bond could not overcome. As a human, Lucas aged normally, while Ferrara's Vrisari longevity extended her life for centuries. The first silver strands in his dark hair were cause for gentle teasing between them. The first signs of physical frailty decades later could not be so easily dismissed. "I always knew this day would come," Lucas said one evening, as they sat in their private garden, watching twin moons rise above the capital. His once strong hands now bore the tremors of advanced age, though his mind remained as sharp as ever. Ferrara took his weathered hand in hers, which remained as smooth and youthful as the day they had first bonded. Through their connection, she felt not fear or regret from him, but a profound peace. "I have lived more fully in these decades with you than I would have in millennia alone," she said softly. As Lucas's final days approached, their bond allowed them one last gift, a complete fusion of memories and emotion that transcended the physical limitations of his failing body. Ferrara spent days at his bedside, their minds linked in communion so deep that the boundaries between them temporarily dissolved. When he finally slipped away, a piece of his consciousness remained within hers, not as a ghost or echo, but as an integrated aspect of their shared being. Ferrara's heart ached physically with his passing, the pain of loss intensified by their profound connection. Yet unlike the hollow devastation she had feared, she found that the essence of their bond endured beyond death. Lucas remained present in her thoughts and decisions, his perspective continuing to balance her own, even in his physical absence. Rather than retreating into grief, Ferrara channeled their shared strength into a new vision. She founded the Council of True Bond, a galactic body dedicated to fostering empathy, cooperation, and peace between diverse species. Representatives from worlds that had once been bitter enemies now sat together, working toward shared prosperity rather than competition. In the palace courtyard, a polished obelisk of obsidian rose toward the stars, engraved with symbols of all species that had successfully bonded since Ferrara and Lucas's pioneering union. The monument glowed faintly at dusk, powered by the same psychic technology that had once facilitated the bonding ritual, now repurposed as a symbol of unity. The palace gardens, once formal and intimidating, were transformed into bioluminescent orchards infused with the same bonding fluid algae that had facilitated Ferrara and Lucas's union. Children of mixed heritage played among trees that glowed with gentle light, symbolic of how the raw material of ritual death now cultivated new life. Centuries passed, and Ferrara continued to rule with wisdom, tempered by human perspective. Though her physical appearance remained largely unchanged, those closest to her noticed subtle shifts in her mannerisms and speech patterns, places where Lucas's influence had permanently altered her being. She spoke often of our decisions rather than my commands, honoring the partnership that had changed everything. As twin suns set over a galaxy, forever altered by their union, Ferrara stood atop her palace, gazing at stars whose light had traveled for millennia to reach her eyes. Within her mind, she felt the echo of Lucas's heartbeat, a reminder that even in loss, true connection endures beyond physical form. The Empress, who had executed 47 husbands, had become the architect of a new era of interspecies harmony. The human prisoner, who had walked unshackled into her ritual chamber, had become immortalized, not just in her memory, but in the transformed society his courage had helped create. Together, they had proven that authentic connection, the willingness to risk vulnerability and truly see another being, could not only save lives, but transform entire civilizations. Their legacy lived on in every successful bond that followed, in every hybrid child born into a world that celebrated diversity rather than fearing it, in every treaty signed between former enemies who discovered they had more to gain through cooperation than conflict, and in quiet moments, when the weight of centuries pressed heavily upon her shoulders, Ferrara would close her crimson eyes and feel Lucas's presence within her, reminding her that love, expressed not as conquest, but as shared sacrifice, contained power enough to reshape galaxies.